What's the hardest thing you've ever had to say no to? I had to say no to staying in Japan. My wife was unhappy with the job market for expats and wanted to come back to the States. I really wanted to stay, but I like my wife more than Japan, so we left. He likes his wife more than Japan. My old boss, in response to an offer to come back to the job I had left a month prior. I really liked that job and I liked the industry. I was also getting ready to start a new, much cooler, role in the company. My wife didn't like the area we lived in. I wasn't a huge fan of it either and wanted to move somewhere else. I ended up finding a job closer to her hometown and we moved there. I absolutely hate this job. I hate the area. Moving also meant giving up on a house that we bought as an investment. That was 3 months ago. I still get messages from my old boss and a few of the other managers at the old plant telling me that the door is open if I wanted to come back. It's getting harder to keep telling them no. You should talk to your wife about it. There has to be a compromise somewhere there, maybe if you moved somewhere in the middle of her hometown and the job, depending on the distance of course. As a college student paying my way through college with 2 part-time jobs, my grandparents offered to pay off my college. Now this is a very large amount of money. They offered me around $50,000 that I would of course pay back over time. It seems like an extremely generous gesture, but my grandparents are downright evil and will hang this over my head for the rest of my life. It's hard to summarize their wickedness, but they are very manipulative and demanding. So my nephew got taken away by child services. We live in TX, he lives in Inn. We went through 3 in social workers while he went through 3 fosters. We finally got to the background check and home visit with our local social worker. She gives us the notes and progress reports from the child psychologist. Through the reports, he went from not being potty trained, calling everyone mommy, and being considered developmentally challenged with the first 2 fosters to potty trained, knowing his ABCs, and calling his 3rd foster parents mommy and daddy. These parents expressed interest in adopting him. He thought my still a stranger and was terrified of my Phil, even calling him monster. My wife and I both agreed the best thing for him was to stay with his fosters and not uproot him and risk destroying all the progress he made. Also getting him out of the family and a shot at a normal stable life. One of the hardest decisions we've ever made, but I don't regret it one bit. Crap, it would destroy me to see my niece and nephew have to go through that. Really strong of you to let him settle in and stay, and by the sound of it the right thing to do. A salesperson who tried to sell Oxford encyclopedias in front of my house. He was nearly on the verge of tears for some reason and he desperately tried to convince me to buy the set. I calmly told him that I have Wikipedia and Google for learning anything I wanted and I don't need them. This made me sad. I wonder why he was so emotional. I had a particularly bad stretch of financial problems after leaving a bad marriage and striking it out on my own as a single mom. Money was so scarce that at one point I was paying for food on my credit card because I had no available cash. One thing I readily sacrificed for and made sure of though, was that every Christmas there was one thing wrapped under the tree that my son had written to Santa and asked for. I always encouraged him to ask for a few things so that I had some maneuvering room. One year he proudly announced that he was asking Santa for just one thing, a trip to Disneyland. He sounded so happy when he told me this, a big smile on his face and with this feeling of discovery, because he said, "Mom, I know you don't have the money for us to go to Disneyland, but every year Santa always brings me what I ask for, so this year I'm asking for Disneyland." That's the night I had to tell him, "No, we won't be going to Disneyland, because there is no Santa." He was devastated. I was devastated. I had to say no to him about a lot of things while he was growing up, but this was the most difficult. TLDR. No, because there is no Santa. Wife left me and took my 4-year-old daughter 2 years ago. Divorce was final a year ago. The hardest no I have to do, sometimes daily, is when my daughter asks if I can stay when I leave her mom's house. Rips my heart out every time. When my son was much younger we had to hospitalize him because he had threatened to harm himself. Wasn't the first time and it was under the guidance of a psychologist. My wife and I visited on alternating days since he was only allowed 1 visitor per day. Each time he would beg me to take him home. If I loved him I would get him out of there. Had to say no each time. Cried my eyes out each night. He's all good now and one heck of a kid. Going to my dream school. RISD is really hard to get into. One of the best art schools in the US. And I was so psyched I got accepted. But I couldn't exactly afford to be $220,000 in debt when I graduated with a graphic design degree. Ugh. I had to tell my marching band director in high school no when he asked if I was actually going to our every other year parade at Disney World. My family always struggled growing up but we couldn't afford it. The part that made it especially hard on me is that I already promised him that I could go because an aunt of mine told me she would pay my way. I was a freshman in high school and felt horrible about it. I felt like I lied to this man, who was a fantastic director. The room and flight had deposits put down already so the program lost money on me. They had to adjust the marching plans to cover the hole I created. All of my friends were going and teased me about not going. I felt like the scum of the school and blamed my aunt who never sent the money, until she called and asked how the trip went. She had sent a check to me. My mom checked the mail, opened the letter to me, and then cashed the check and hid the letter. We were always broke and she said she used it for groceries but I've never believed that. Her 2-carton-a-week cigarette addiction and my dad's roll-a-week snuff addiction never suffered, but money sent specifically for me for the one fun trip I had an opportunity for certainly did. I still resent her to this day for that. 11 years ago, when I was 17, in Chicago for a concert with my older sister, we were hanging out in the mall before the show and some older guy approaches me and says, "You like video games?" I was wearing a Zelda t-shirt. Apparently he owned a game software company developing a game targeted at girls, and he wanted some testers. I lived in MN at the time, so I couldn't participate, but being paid to play games would have been magical. Also, before anyone suggests anything, he gave me a business card and looked him up online. He was legit. Telling the woman I love more than anyone else in existence 3 times. 1. We were 18 and about to go to college. We had always lived about an hour from each other and it was finally an opportunity for us to try our relationship. Unfortunately, I had decided to go somewhere else far away because I knew it would be better for me in the long run. She begged me to go to school with her and through swollen, tear-filled eyes, I told her I couldn't do it. 2. Fast forward 4 years later. She's engaged to be married. I was home visiting from school and we agreed to go out for some drinks. She does a fine job of getting me thoroughly drunk and back to her apartment. She lays a, "Do you think we'd be the ones engaged if you had gone to school with me?" To which I reply, "I really have no idea." She then tells me it's our last opportunity to be together as she begins kissing up and down my neck. See, we had never slept together, and she figured now, just months before her wedding, would be the best time to tread on that territory. Once again, through a cloudy mind and raging desires, I told her no and left her room. 3. Fast forward an additional 4 years. She's married with a son living across the country. We hadn't talked much since she tried to sleep with me, but was going to be in town. At this point, I think we both wanted to reconcile after everything we had been through and the friendship was too important to lose. We agreed to meet for dinner and drinks. After a bit of bar hopping, she decides to drop on me that she thinks about me every night and is still in love with me, which led to eventually telling me that if I gave the word, she'd leave her husband to be with me. I could never be responsible for breaking up a family and after a year of no's finally ended communications with her. To this day I can still think about her and feel my heartbeat in my throat. Edit. Grammar. Update. I'm incredibly thankful for all the support and feedback. You guys are awesome. Thank you. Update 2. Thank you so much for the gold. I had no idea the impact my story would have and I'm glad you enjoyed reading my experiences. I'm still reading through comments and trying to respond. I have so many conflicting emotions about this. This is gonna be kind of depressing, but are you okay? I was very depressed and suicidal, and I instinctively try to cover such things up. It took a lot to be able to say no, I'm not. I like how this is one of the very few, in a way, positive no's in this thread. My daughter's friends were all going to Hershey Park last summer, and she thought it was just this most wondrous, magical place and that nothing would make her happier than to go to Hershey Park. But I'm a single mom and don't have a lot of extra money, and I just couldn't afford it, and I had to tell her no. She looked like I had broken her heart when I told her I couldn't take her. I felt like such a crap. My parents thought that it might be too expensive and that I might drive them to debt if I went to India for college versus staying in a crappy college in Nepal, as we had no idea at the time how expensive it might be. Coming from an extremely rural area and without prior knowledge of fees, lifestyle in the city etc. I really didn't have that much guidance nor information to explain my parents. I didn't have any outside help at that time, so thought I might have to rely on parents big time and that they might be quite right. I said no to my parents about going to college in Nepal, very inexpensive and affordable but for a poor quality education, and went to college in India. 2 Ms degrees later, I am where I am. Happy, and parents are happy I did it too. Didn't drive them to debt. So many people helped me along the way. Thank you all, and this world turned out to be an amazing place. Those of you who debate about going to college for financial hardship, if there is a will, there is a way. Sorry dad and mom, but I had to say no to you at the time, which is probably the only time I said that to you. Said no to pills for the first time like 8 months ago. That was really freaking tough. Still clean though. Whoa. Thanks for all the kind words guys. Blows my mind how wonderful complete strangers can be. Drunken sex with a girl I love. I said no because I knew she'd regret it. We had sex the next day when she was sober. Hey, happy ending. An emotionally vulnerable young woman who was all over me, making a bad decision by doing so. Teenaged me was pretty much saturated in hormones, but I bit down. Told her she was pretty but no. Left the party and kicked myself all the way home. Then she went to bed with some other butthole. Sex. She was very drunk, and I was tipsy. I'd wanted to frick her for years but instead I went with my gut. Said no. Got her to her place safe and went home. Later she told me that her ex showed up that night. They did it, then got into a brawl with cops called. He didn't want her back, just sex. Read. She called her ex because you left. Most of these answers are about relationships and when they had to say no to a romantic partner, but as someone trying to lose weight, it's still incredibly hard for me to say no to having cookies and ice cream every day. As an adult I now recognize Cookie Monster as a tragic figure. Friend of mine asked to join him in Vegas for his birthday weekend. He already had a corner suite at Planet Hollywood paid for. He had a connect, and he even told me he had a voucher for an airline so my flights would be free. A family member works for the airline. My grandmother was on her deathbed and we were expecting her to go any day at that point, so I turned my friend down. I'd like to think that if I had told my grandmother about the offer, she would have probably called me up and told me to go. Found out after the trip that they actually had a once-in-a-lifetime trip. They partied with Holly Madison and the birthday boy threw up on her leg. They had similar stories and partied hard. You would have regretted going for the rest of your life. Even if it's what your grandmother would have wanted, the guilt eats away at you. A threesome with a girl I really loved and her friend. I had done it before with other girlfriends. I have had threesomes with girlfriends before and every time it ended up ending the relationship. Not necessarily that day or the next, but men or women have a really hard time seeing their boyfriend's penis inside another woman. They were both drunk as heck and I was only slightly buzzed. I wouldn't take advantage of that situation. 2 reasons to not do it, but it was extremely hard to not do it. To have had enough threesomes to actually have some perspective about their consequences. This is what I want in life. After a string of crappy relationships, I made a promise to myself to not get involved with a woman for at least 6 months. 2 months later, in the pub with some friends, and a very attractive woman starts coming onto me in a big way. I had to say no to my promise to myself. I would have said no to that promise too. A few years back, it took everything in my being to keep me from killing myself. So, there's that. I have the girl of my dreams naked in her own apartment. We're passing around a bottle, getting sloshed. We're working our way up to frick for hours. It gets to that point and I have no condom. She has no condom. She has no condom in her own place. I said no to kids and STDs. Not that she had either, but you never know. I'm a man, not a penis. You can capitalize that she didn't have a condom in her own place, but this is still on you. Going over to an attractive person's house to drink, you should have had a condom in every pocket and one taped behind your balls so that no matter the position you find yourself in when the time comes, there is a condom within reach of your free hand. When I run into a homeless person and they ask for change money and I literally have nothing left and I say sorry no, I don't, because I just stuffed my face with a nice meal and bought myself nice clothes. Then you just see them walk away silently, hopelessly, and you watch from a distance. It breaks my heart. I can go hours just thinking about it. I always figure if I want to help out the homeless, I'd rather give them a cigarette or donate to a program that already exists to help these folks out. I hate to think of the odds that the $5 I just handed to some raggedy kid on the street is going towards his next OD. Saying no to ruminating. Been hit with depression over several years and have really turned a corner over the past 2. But stopping that negative spiral before it takes hold requires more effort than I care to admit to. Best offer was 2 Russian girls, 1 hotel room, the week after I married. I can't say it was hard to say no to, but I figured the timing was thanks to Murphy and his law. It was probably also a scam or something. My wonderful little brother asking if he could come with me on a cruise broke my heart in 1,000 pieces, saying goodbye. I'm sure this will get buried. Last year my mom was in the hospital with cancer, split up staying with her into shifts. Various family of her husband on first, my brother on second, and I was third. Now she was basically heavily medicated and slept all the time, except she managed to be aware and awake in the middle of the night. She was a nurse and I had started going to school for becoming a doctor. One night she was having a rough night and I was trying to comfort her. She looks at and says to me, "I'm scared. Are you?" Now at this point we knew how bad it was, so I just looked at her and said, "No, when you get better we will go shopping for your birthday as planned." She was very unselfish but liked fashion, an interest we shared. So I took her to the Mag Mile or high-end outlets around Chicago and bought her nice clothes for birthday and Christmas. A few days later hospice was arranged and a few weeks later she was gone. Of course we kept up the shift thing once she was moved home and passed while it was just me there, which we all knew she'd go with me there just because I was there from the beginning and we had a strong bond. I was scared shitless but couldn't for 1 second show fear or emotion except strength. I had lost my dad 2 years prior and didn't want to lose my mom at 26 years old and have no parents left before I hit 27. But looking her dead in the eye and telling her no I wasn't scared was almost impossible. Sorry for wall of text, but thanks if you read this through. In college my roommates and I used to hang out at a bar a lot because there was a very hot waitress. At first I definitely thought she was always nice to us because she was just after tips, and she certainly got good ones. But after a while she started hanging out with us outside of the bar and coming over to our house to drink and smoke and whatnot. So it turned out she actually did enjoy our company. I was dating the girl who would eventually become my wife, so I never tried to do anything with her, although I flirted here and there. Fast forward to one night where my roommates and I are hanging out at a different bar, and she walks in with all of her friends. I go over and greet her and we talk for about half an hour or so, then she goes back to her friends. Later in the night she finds me and is clearly a little tipsy. She puts her arm around me and pulls me to the side. "Do you love your girlfriend?" That's a dangerous question. So I play it carefully. "Yes." "Okay, but are you in love with her?" "Yes." "Never mind then." Now at this point my interest is piqued, so I can't just leave it there. So I bring her back and tell her to say whatever she had on her mind. She tells me that she has some old high school friends in town and they were all headed back to her house to hang out and drink some more. She points over to the table they're at and there are just like 4 or 5 extremely hot girls sitting there. She tells me she wanted me to come. Now I don't, for 1 minute, believe that she was inviting me back for some kind of fantasy orgy or anything, but I certainly think she was interested and wanted me alone that night. She was incredibly hot and it was one of the hardest things I ever had to do to say no. I told my roommate about it and he kept ensuring me that he would never tell my girlfriend and he'd do whatever to cover for me. But I'm just not that kind of guy, I suppose. But it would have been a heck of a night. 3 summers ago I had just graduated high school and my best friend was having a party. Usually I would only go to parties if my girlfriend came with me. We were all set to go, but the day before the party she started to feel really sick. She told me that she probably wouldn't be able to go tomorrow. She told me to go though, seeing as it was my best friend's party. So I decided to go. I grabbed a case of Molson Canadian from the liquor store and headed over to my friend's place. This party was a wild one. Everyone was wasted by the time I got there and it was only 10 PM when I showed up. People were laying on his kitchen countertop doing body shots off each other. Girls were making out. It was basically a single man's paradise. As the night progressed I began talking to this girl from my English class. We never really talked during high school but I always saw her around. The conversation was really interesting. We were talking about what we were going to do after high school. We talked about our love of hockey and somehow the conversation got around to talking about sexual experiences. At this point the party was so loud that she asked me if I wanted to go somewhere quiet to keep talking. Being the idiot that I am, I agreed. We head to my friend's room and we continue our conversation about our sexual experiences. She told me that she had always wanted to give a guy a BJ with another girl. I clearly wasn't picking up that this was a hint and I didn't know how to reply. I tried to change the subject back to hockey. We talked about that for a bit until she just straight up asked me a question that I will never forget. She asked me if she should text her friend to come in the room with us so that they could both blow me at the same time. I was really tempted to say yes, but I just thought about my girlfriend and I politely declined. I reminded her that I had a girlfriend, left the room, said goodbye to my best friend and went home. You are radiating Canadian throughout this story. I love it. Saying no to my drunken dumb butt brother. Just got off the phone with him again. I am so sick of dealing with him. Alcoholics suck. It's a disease, go to the doctor. I can't help him. I have tried. I gave him a job doing some painting for my business. This was right before Christmas years ago. I suggested getting his 3 kids some presents. I was hoping it might make him get out of his own head. Instead he went on a bender and took a hammer to the toilet in the Section 8 housing. He got kicked out and then cried about how life was so unfair. Dumb but your life is crap. Quit blaming your parents who died 20 years ago. He is 51. You don't get to blame your parents after the age of 30. An ego-centered, selfish, unbelievably sexy ex-girlfriend who wanted to get back together. The sex was incredible but I have never felt so alone than when I was with her. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.